Hi, my name is Guy Trainin, and I'm an Associate Professor of Education at UNL and Elementary Education Coordinator. And I'm here to share with you the results of our surveys about 21st century learning in elementary environments. I'd like to start with the fact that while I'm here talking to you, there's actually a large team of professors and graduate students working on this problem. And the main idea that drove us to start this process and to continue down it, as you will hear quite a bit down the road, our thinking is that 21st century learning is not an option anymore. This is what we have to do in education. This is 2012. The kids that we're educating will go into the workforce sometime in the 2020s and beyond that, and will work almost to 2100 actually. So we have to prepare them to the world that's going to be and not necessarily to the world there is right now. So you can have an understanding of how much data we've collected, we've actually had multiple sources of information, and I'll share some of those with you. We've surveyed all of our student teachers during the last year, and that's over 140 students who have graduated since, and we know what they know about technology and how they feel about technology and using it in the classroom, and this is some of the things we're using to change our own program. We've got a technology survey that over 200 teachers across the 6 districts we're working with have responded to. Out of those, we chose 20 teachers to interview about their technology uses, and 10 teachers were observed. This is not because we don't think that all 200 are doing wonderful things, but just because we have to consider the economy of time and resources. And so we chose to focus on teachers across many schools doing different things at different grade levels. We've also had an iPad project that have tried to use iPads in practicum assignments with students in our program, and that has yielded some very interesting results that we'll share with you probably in the near future. The first thing I want to talk about, and one of the first questions we asked everybody, was what kind of hardware do you have available in your school? And as we looked at that, and we looked at the slide that you can see right now, we found that there were really 3 groups of hardware available to teachers. And one was the universal instruments, and those were the things that most teachers, if not all, had in their classrooms that included teacher computers, internet access, LCD projectors that even if they weren't available in every classroom were readily available around the classroom, document cameras, and student desktops. So these were universally available. The second group of hardware that we looked at were what we call available, and those are things that are mostly available in the school. They're usually on mobile labs, or available to transfer from teacher to teacher or checkout mechanism. And those were digital cameras, camcorders, flip cameras, or something along that line, and student laptops. We do know that iPads are encroaching and getting into that area as well, but in our survey they weren't there. And then the last group of hardware was the local technology, and we call it local because it is highly available in specific classrooms or specific schools and then totally unavailable in others, and those include iClickers, iPods or iPads, smart boards, etc. So they're either there or not. In the places that are there, they're actually almost universal. However, they're not in every school. When we look at personal use of technology, and we asked about personal use of technology for very specific reason. We really believe that technology is one of those things that crosses boundaries. And it's really hard to say what's personal, what's for professional use only. And it's something that we've faced across many professions, not just teaching. And so when we asked about technology use, we started by asking about personal use. And again, we find that there's a significant portion of technologies that at this point are universal. So surfing the web, using internet for research, shopping online, which we all like doing, and email are all universally used by teachers, with very few exceptions. There's a small, very small minority of teachers that aren't engaged in that. And if you look at the graph that is presented, you can see that different people use it at different frequencies. So some people, for example, if you look at surfing the web, there's a small proportion, about 10 teachers, who say they surf the web only a few times a month. Another small proportion says that it's weekly, but most of the teachers that we survey said we surf the web on a daily basis and even multiple times a day, which sounds just about right. A second group of applications, again, personally, using e-commerce, video sharing sites, are again being used by about 75% of teachers. And again, you can see that distribution of how many people are using it on a monthly basis. That's fairly common, actually. About a third of those who say they use these technologies use it about once or a little bit more a month. And then on a weekly basis is the second most common answer. The third group are things that are used by about half the population, and this is blogs and online video conferencing. We're talking about Skype or other technologies like it, and reading online from blogs, and that's about half of our teachers. That's not a small amount, so that's a very promising development that is fairly recent. And finally, about a third to a fourth of the teachers responding talked about participating in listserv discussions, using smartphones to access the internet, and having personal web pages. So those are teachers who are a little bit more involved in other technologies, or sometimes, especially with listservs, these are teachers who simply have been dealing with technology for longer periods of time, because listservs are actually a technology that's right now waning, and other technologies like blogs are coming up. When we talk about professional use of technology, which is the next question in our survey, now we know what you use on a personal level, what do you use professionally? We ask teachers to respond to very specific technologies. And one of the points that I do want to say at this point is that these technologies are constantly evolving, as we all know, and the list that we would have for the same kind of survey in 2 years from now would probably look very, very different. So you have to consider the temporary aspect of technology here as well. Again, we have the universal technologies that are used by most teachers. And the two most obvious ones are teacher computers, internet access, and the projector. And this corresponds very, very well, of course, with what's available in the classroom. I have this, I use this on a very regular basis. Right after that are the three things that teachers seem to be using. About 75% of teachers say they use on a fairly regular basis. And again, you can look at the frequencies. The lighter the color, the higher the frequency of use. But we have using student desktops, digital cameras, document cameras, and laptops are just around the 75% of teachers who responded to the survey. Beyond that, you can see that there's a rapid decline, and these are mostly the technologies that we called local. That is, if you have it in your classroom, you may find a really good way to use them, but most teachers don't have access to them and therefore don't use them. And that includes iPods or iPads, smart boards, iClickers, lip pens, and ebooks that have different levels of popularity in classrooms, and teachers at times have reported also a little bit struggling with finding what to do with these without a lot of preparation. So this is a piece we'll come back to later, but it is important to mention right now. In this graph, what we try to do is we try to juxtapose three kinds of information. So we have training, how much people feel ready and trained to use the technology, how available it is, and then how much is it actually being used. So the first thing is internet access, and you can see on the bottom axis it's availability. It's available to almost all classrooms. It's very close to 100%. When you talk about training, most teachers feel very well trained. That's why on the training axis, or the y-axis, it is very high up. And then the size of the bubble and the number inside it talk about how much people feel they are actually going to use that or are using that technology, and 99% of teachers are using that technology. Next is using a teacher computer, and you can see that you can barely see the new bubble because it is basically one on top of the other, and this is why this slide is also animated, so you can see the development. The next one, using an LCD projector, it is available almost universally. Training a little bit lower, use just over 9 out of 10 are using it on a regular basis. So again, we're seeing here a very good match. Digital cameras at 82%, you're seeing that availability is a little bit lower, training is a little bit lower, therefore it's being used less. Next, document camera, very much the same, although there's a sense that there's less training than people would like. They would like a few more pointers about how to use document cameras. They don't feel as confident, and as a result, the use goes down as well. Digital cameras, these are camcorders actually, used 81%. Here, training isn't the problem, but availability is. Student desktop, used by about 3 out of 4 teachers, so that's considerably lower. There's a little bit less availability, and there was a sense that this was also because of the distance and the transition times that would be required to move from where teachers are teaching in the regular day and then where the desktops are located, sometimes in pods outside classrooms, sometimes in a computer classroom. It requires transition, therefore teachers are using it a little bit less. When we go down to laptops, teachers are using it, about less than half of the teachers are using it. So this is a significant drop. If all of the technologies we talked about so far were fairly commonly used, now we're going to less than 50%. Teachers are feeling less confident about using them. It's probably about problem solving when it doesn't work, not necessarily when it does work. And it's about tying it clearly to instruction that is becoming a problem, but it is still, as we saw before, fairly universally available. When we go to using different kind of camcorders and flip cameras and those kind of more specific devices, again, we're at about the 50% use, 57% in this case, but you can see the jump to those very specific local hardware. It's much less available. It's used by only about a quarter of teachers. Those are smartboards the first, iClickers are next, and you can see that though they're there, they're considerably less used than the smartboards. So they're at about a sixth of the teachers. iPods and iPads, despite the fact that they're just as actually less available than the other two technologies, they're used more. So teachers are using mobile technologies in ways that are more effective than the older, less mobile, less adaptable technologies like the iClickers and the smartboards that are hard to move around and that require a lot more of preparation before you get to go with it. And last, and not necessarily the most important, ebooks and lip pens, which seems to be a technology that we've tried to play with and are exiting. This is an important piece about technology. We're going to try out things that are not going to work, and we're going to, quote unquote, experiment with them and then decide this is a good educational device or no, this is not very good, this needs to exit stage left, and it's been a nice experiment and we need to move on. This is another way to look at the gaps between training and availability, and what we can see is that in some areas like using teacher computer, internet access and all of that, teachers are feeling that there's a match between how much it's available and how much training there is. There are gaps, especially using the visual devices. So using cameras, using camcorders, using the flip cameras, there's a gap. And then in the local devices, we have significant gaps in how do we use iClickers effectively, how do we use those ebooks, how do we use those smartboards, where teachers are actually supposed to catch up and do a lot of the work themselves. That seems to be a gap there in training, and teachers are feeling that they're not as well prepared as they should. Whereas with iPods and iPads, it seemed like, despite the fact that these are the newest technologies we really looked at, teachers have really quickly adapted to them and are almost naturally adapting them to their classrooms. Probably the availability of apps and also the fact that they're intuitively approached. Kids do them very easily, and so on one hand, you have a lot of uses. On the other hand, you have kids and teachers being able to interact with them easily, which is productive. When teachers talked about training needs, we really found out that there were 3 areas where teachers felt they needed training. The first one is multimedia, and teachers were extremely interested in looking at new ways to do multimedia presentation. This is beyond just looking at your PowerPoint and how to do PowerPoint based, but looking at newer technologies like Glogster, Prezi, and other things, and ways to use web videos, whether it is students uploading the videos or teachers doing that work, or utilizing existing ones. The second area is web authoring, and that is how to most effectively use websites, blogs, Google Docs, and podcasts. And the shift the teachers really indicate is, how do we do these things that we're familiar with? How do we become producers instead of just consumers? And how do we help our kids become producers instead of consumers? Lastly, electronic communication, ways to use teleconferencing that is available for free, like Skype. How do we conduct virtual field trips? How do we do all of these communications between schools that would help strengthen the students' academic performance? Where the third area that teachers asked to know about and they thought would impact their students. And if you look at the graphs to the right, you would see that teachers are engaged with those, but they also want to learn more about these areas, which is very important. And now, to discuss in detail the observations, some of the surveys, and the interviews is Lori Friedrich, who's an instructor and a graduate student at UNL.
Another section of the survey asked teachers how they felt about technology. We had 8 items on this section, and a couple of the examples were, I love learning new ways to integrate technology into my teaching. Another one noted, I'm afraid to have students use the internet because of parent reactions. And as you can note on the graph, 5 being a high or a very positive feeling, we were surprised with some of the results. It was interesting that there was a difference between K-6 teachers and university methods instructors as far as their feelings about technology. K-6 teachers tended to be a bit more positive about using technology in their teaching. Between genders, we found a very small difference, with males being a little bit more comfortable with technology, and very little difference among grade levels, which was very helpful for us to know as we plan professional development ideas for teachers in grades K through 6. Another area of the survey asked teachers about their feelings about technology. And as we looked at that, we were concerned or curious to find out if there was a difference between teachers who had been teaching for many years and those who were newer to the teaching profession. And we expected to find large differences in technology depending upon the number of years that they've taught. And actually, there was a very small difference. The teachers who had taught 0 to 6 years tended to have the most positive feelings about using technology in their teaching. But in general, the more veteran teachers were a bit less positive, but not greatly. So this is encouraging. Everyone seemed to be relatively positive about utilizing technology. One of the questions that we asked is if teachers felt that they had been prepared to use multiple literacies by their teacher education program. And here there was a definite advantage to the younger or the newer teachers. Those teachers who had been teaching 1 to 6 years tended to agree or strongly disagree with that statement, that they did feel they'd been well prepared to use multiple literacies in their teaching. As we got up to teachers who had taught 17 and more years, there had been very little training in teacher education programs at that point. So this is not surprising, and it was encouraging that the newer teachers coming out do feel more prepared, and we want to continue to increase that even more. One of the questions that we asked teachers in the survey had to do with one of the Nebraska multiple literacy standards, having to do with engaging with a variety of cultures through electronic means. It was interesting that over 75% of the teachers either had not felt that it was applicable to their situation or did not think that it was happening in their classroom. 12% agreed that they were beginning to engage with a variety of cultures through electronic means, and that was very exciting. Some of the electronic communication that are noted in the standards include things such as podcast, video chats, and distance learning. And this could easily be achieved as classroom teachers began to do some research with other classrooms or other, whether they be in the United States and having students of different cultures or anywhere throughout the world. And one great idea could be reading a multicultural piece of literature and discussing that with another classroom as a way to broaden and bring that multicultural experiences to classrooms that may not experience that otherwise. Engaging and motivating students through technology. An overwhelming majority of the teachers claimed that their students were highly motivated and engaged when working with technology. As you look at the graph, we had 78% of teachers who noted that students were highly engaged when they worked with technology in their lessons. And 61% noted that they were more motivated, while only 11% said that students were less focused. Sometimes these teachers talked about special education students who had a difficult time focusing. Ways that I use technology. Over 40% of teachers use technology to individualize instruction. 50% used it to stimulate critical thinking, and 50% used it to reinforce skills. On the graph, you'll notice the dark purple notes teachers who agree with the statement, and the light purple indicates those who strongly agree. Some of the statements that they discussed were, I find that technology can help me individualize instruction for content and pace. This was encouraging because that's a very positive usage of technology in helping teachers be able to meet students where they're at. We were also encouraged to see that there was as many teachers using the technology to encourage critical thinking in students as there were to practice skills. We think that this has come a long way in the way that technology had been used for many, many years as kind of a practice over skills that had been learned. Throughout the 20 interviews that were conducted, several themes began to emerge. The first one had to do with students being engaged and learning when technology was integrated. One teacher had a quote noting, "It's the 21st century. Our kids are using technology all the time, and I think sometimes they have to shut down their technology to come to school, and so learning isn't fun or engaging. School needs to keep up with students who know how to use this technology." A second thing that emerged from the interviews had to do with technology becoming a tool for innovative teaching. There were 59 examples given by teachers about innovative uses for technology in their teaching, while only 16 examples were given of technology that was used to replicate current methods, and only 8 examples of technology used for teacher productivity. We used to see teachers using it mainly for grading and organizing classes and things, and now it's very exciting to see them going beyond recreating what they had been doing with worksheets and overhead transparencies to having students be more engaged and encouraging that critical thinking that we've talked about. A third theme that emerged was the support for teachers in integrating technology as key. I found it interesting that all teachers that were interviewed said that they had technology support. 35 comments referred to a computer teacher, a media specialist, or a technology coach who assisted in teaching the students and the teachers how to use technology. 7 examples were shared of teachers helping other teachers with technology. 5 examples were shared of students helping teachers with technology, and 3 examples were shared of student teachers helping teachers with technology practices, websites, and ideas. This is an exciting mix as everyone is learning together, and the more assistance that they have, teachers are feeling more empowered to actually utilize the technology in their own teaching. The fourth theme that emerged were teachers having goals for their technology integration. They want to learn how to use the technology that they have for teaching. 8 of the 20 teachers expressed a fear of being left behind with technology use, especially some who were in schools where there was less technology available. They're afraid they may not be able to keep up with everyone else, and with the rapid change in technology, that's a great fear for teachers. Teachers did mention that there were some technologies that they would like to have more of to use in teaching. Especially noted were smartboards and laptops for each student. And the final theme that emerged had to do with teachers who are really using the websites and programs that you're providing in your district. There were over 100 examples of teaching websites or programs shared during these 20 interviews, and we'll be making those available to you as well, so you can see the kinds of things that teachers are doing. We conducted then 10 observations with some of the teachers based upon their interviews. In all 10, the following themes were observed, and note that these came from the OPTIC integration observation rubric that we used as we were observing the lessons. We absolutely noticed students acting ethically and in accordance with acceptable uses when they were using technology. Internet safety was definitely being observed. All students were able to use the technology effectively. So obviously, between the computer teachers and the classroom teachers, they had taught students how to use the technology, and now they were applying it to their learning. Number 3, most students were focused on the curricular objectives. It was very clear that the teachers told them what the content was and how the technology could increase and enhance their learning. Number 4, most students were highly engaged in the use of technology. Not only did teachers report that students were highly engaged, it was observed. They were taking digital pictures, transforming them through Comic Life, actively researching and creating multimedia presentations. It was interesting and exciting to watch students who finished early helping other students who were just learning a new website or technology. And the final theme that emerged had to do with technologies representing learning activities that could not otherwise easily be done. As we noted before, it's one thing to take your worksheet and put it onto a whiteboard, and it's an entirely different thing to have students actually doing some research and extended study and creating things on their own. And those were the kinds of things that we were noticing. We saw students saving time as they use specific websites to look up words containing a smaller word and then creating an alphabet book with that. They researched information and downloaded pictures, creating multimedia presentations that they then shared. They also wrote stories with computer programs that were able to spell out words for them that they could not spell on their own, allowing them to complete a very motivated reading piece and writing piece that would not have happened without the assistance of that technology. And then they were also able to do their own self-assessment for fluency. Some students were using iPods and doing audio recordings where they could listen and then, using a rubric, give themselves some feedback on how they read with expression and their time. And some people were using iMovie and GarageBand on laptops and actually doing video and audio recordings so they could watch their facial expression and really observe what happens as they did reading.
In education, we have a lot of challenges that we're facing today, but it is a brave new world out there, and we do need to walk into it together. Teachers, pre-service teachers, specialists, university educators, and students working together. The challenges we see it is to educate a new generation of teachers ready to teach in the 21st century to all students. We want to work with partner districts, you in front of us, we hope, to develop a common vision to make sure that there's infrastructure ready for our students to walk in and use technology with elementary students, to collaborate with schools to create the environment where everybody can try out new technologies, knowing that not all technologies are immediately successful, or that everything that we try will be the only option to do things. We need to collaborate with technology leaders in the schools and with classroom teachers. The second part of our challenge is, as we educate a new generation of teachers, is at UNL and our partner institutions. We need to make sure that university faculty and all of the classrooms they work in are equipped with the same kind of technology that is available at schools and will be available in the future. We need to redesign our courses to make sure that technology is a significant part of it and that all of our students will be ready when they come out into schools to use technology in effective ways that improve instruction. We need to add a layer of assessment to make sure that we are gathering data that would support our practices and would keep improving our progress towards using technology across classroom. And finally, developing a master's program in 21st century learning that will help current teachers improve their skills and infuse our program with new ideas and new motivation. In fall of 2011, we proposed to hold a conference that would focus on technology use. It would be workshops around using specific technologies with a lot of hands-on practice. And we project that this will happen October 15th, and we invite all of the teachers from our collaborating districts to come and join us that Saturday, hear a lot about technology, practice using technology, and help us think about the next steps. Thank you.